Jasmine Carter stepped onto the plane with tired eyes but a confident stride. Her latest tech company acquisition had kept her working for 72 hours straight, and all she wanted now was to settle into her first-class seat and get some rest before landing in New York. The flight attendants bustled about the cabin, helping other passengers stow their luggage and get comfortable. When Jasmine reached her seat, she noticed her carry-on was too heavy to lift into the overhead compartment after her exhausting week. She caught the eye of a nearby flight attendant, Miranda Brooks, who was chatting with the co-pilot, Derek Stevens, by the cockpit door. "Excuse me, could I get some help with my bag, please?" Jasmine asked politely, gesturing to her carry-on. Miranda and Derek exchanged a look that Jasmine couldn't quite read. The flight attendant slowly walked over, her smile not reaching her eyes. "Is there a problem?" Miranda asked, her voice carrying just enough edge that several nearby passengers glanced up. "No problem at all. I'm just tired and could use some help with my bag," Jasmine explained, wondering why such a simple request was being met with hostility. Derek, the co-pilot, stepped closer. "You look perfectly capable of handling it yourself," he said, looking Jasmine up and down. "First-class passengers aren't entitled to special treatment beyond what's included in the ticket." Jasmine took a deep breath. "I understand that, but flight attendants typically help passengers with luggage. It's a standard service." "You people always want extra help, don't you?" Miranda muttered, just loud enough for Jasmine and nearby passengers to hear. The cabin grew quiet. An older man across the aisle lowered his newspaper, watching the scene unfold with concern. "I'm not sure what you mean by you people, but I'm simply requesting assistance that any passenger might need," Jasmine said firmly. What happened next stunned everyone in the first-class cabin. Miranda's hand shot out and slapped Jasmine across the face. The sound cracked through the cabin like a whip. "Don't tell me how to do my job," Miranda hissed. Derek stood behind her, arms crossed with a satisfied smirk. "You should find your seat now," he added. Passengers gasped. A woman 3 rows back covered her mouth in shock. A businessman halfway down the aisle had already pulled out his phone and was recording. Jasmine's cheek burned, but she didn't raise her voice or lose her composure. Without another word, she lifted her bag into the overhead compartment herself, the strain visible on her face, and took a seat. Once seated, Jasmine pulled out her phone and laptop. Her hands trembled slightly, but her expression remained calm. She typed rapidly, made 3 brief phone calls, and sent several emails, all within 2 minutes of being slapped. "I need you to pull everything we have on Transglobal Airlines," she said quietly into her phone. "Yes, everything. Board members, major shareholders, company history, complaints filed, all of it, and get my lawyer on the line." A flight attendant making final checks walked by and reminded Jasmine to put her devices in airplane mode soon. It wasn't Miranda, who was now avoiding eye contact while working in another section of the plane. What the flight crew didn't know was that Jasmine Carter wasn't just any first-class passenger. She was the founder and CEO of Carter Tech Industries with a net worth of $3.8 billion. She had built her empire from nothing, fighting discrimination and doubters every step of the way. And she had just decided that Transglobal Airlines was about to learn a valuable lesson about customer service and human dignity. As the plane began taxiing, Jasmine gazed out the window, her reflection showing a determined woman already calculating her next moves. The slap had lasted a second. Her response would reshape an entire industry. The plane leveled at cruising altitude as Jasmine sat quietly in her first-class seat, the red mark on her cheek still visible. Nearby passengers shot concerned glances her way, but no one said anything. The businessman who had recorded the incident leaned across the aisle. "I've got it all on video," he whispered. "That was completely unacceptable. Do you want me to send it to you?" Jasmine nodded gratefully. "Yes, please, that would be helpful." As the man transferred the video, Jasmine returned to her laptop. Her face showed no emotion, but her mind was racing. She wasn't just angry, she was calculating. This wasn't the first time she faced discrimination, but it was the first time someone had physically assaulted her in public. Her phone buzzed with an incoming message from her assistant. "Everything you requested on Transglobal Airlines is in your secure folder. Your lawyer is standing by." Jasmine opened the files and began reading. Transglobal had a history of customer complaints about discriminatory treatment, but most had been settled quietly or dismissed. The airline's CEO, Richard Wilson, had been with the company for 15 years, overseeing its expansion while cutting costs on staff training. 2 seats behind her, Miranda was serving drinks to other passengers, deliberately skipping Jasmine's row. The co-pilot, Derek, had returned to the cockpit after watching the confrontation with approval. Jasmine made a quick call to her financial team. "I want to know our position to acquire shares in Transglobal Airlines," she said quietly. "I'm interested in becoming a significant stakeholder very quickly and very quietly." Her financial advisor sounded surprised. "That's not in our current investment strategy. What's changed?" "I'll explain later. For now, I need options on my desk when I land." Next, she called her PR director. "Reba, I need you to clear my schedule for the next 3 days. We're about to handle a situation that requires my full attention." A woman sitting across from Jasmine looked over curiously. She seemed to recognize Jasmine but couldn't quite place her. Jasmine closed her laptop as the flight attendant announced they would begin their descent soon. She hadn't touched the meal that had been delivered by another crew member. Her stomach was in knots, not from fear but from determination. The older man who had witnessed the slap leaned over. "You're Jasmine Carter, aren't you?" "From Carter Tech." Jasmine nodded slightly. "I thought so. My daughter works in tech and talks about you all the time. You're her hero." He lowered his voice. "Those crew members have no idea who they just messed with, do they?" "No," Jasmine said, a small smile finally appearing on her face. "But they will." As the plane began its descent, Jasmine reviewed the video of the incident again. The slap was clearly visible, as was Derek's smirking approval. She forwarded the video to her lawyer with a simple message: "I want to proceed with all options." Miranda passed by again, deliberately avoiding eye contact. Jasmine watched her, not with hatred but with the cool assessment of someone who had built an empire by understanding people's weaknesses and strengths. When the plane touched down, Jasmine remained in her seat until most passengers had disembarked. As she stood to leave, the captain made an announcement thanking passengers for flying Transglobal Airlines. Jasmine gathered her belongings and walked toward the exit. When she passed Miranda and Derek standing near the door, she paused. "Thank you for the illuminating flight experience," she said calmly. "I look forward to our paths crossing again soon." The confusion on their faces was evident as Jasmine walked off the plane. They clearly had no idea who she was or what was coming. In the terminal, Jasmine's driver was waiting. "Everything okay, Miss Carter? You don't look your usual self." "I'm fine, Tom. But Transglobal Airlines won't be." She settled into the back seat of the car and made one final call. "Dad, remember what you taught me about standing up for myself? About not letting anyone make me feel small." Her voice cracked slightly. "I'm about to put that lesson to work in a big way." As the car pulled away from the airport, Jasmine looked back at the Transglobal logo on the terminal building. In just 2 minutes after being slapped, she had set in motion a plan that would change not just her future, but the future of an entire airline. The morning after the flight incident, Jasmine sat in her penthouse office overlooking the city skyline. 3 computer screens displayed different information. One showed Transglobal Airlines stock prices, another showed company emails her team had legally obtained, and the third displayed the profiles of Miranda Brooks and Derek Stevens. "The investigative team just sent their preliminary report," said Patel, Jasmine's chief of staff, placing a folder on her desk. "You were right, this isn't their first offense." Jasmine opened the folder. Inside were 12 documented complaints against Miranda and 5 against Derek, all from passengers who felt they had been discriminated against. In each case, Transglobal had buried the complaints or settled quietly. "The airline protected them," Jasmine said, shaking her head. "Look at these dates, spanning 3 years." The buzzer on her desk sounded. "Ms. Carter, Detective Rodriguez is here about filing the police report." For the next hour, Jasmine walked the detective through what had happened, showing him the video evidence. His face remained professional, but his eyes widened when he saw the slap. "This is straightforward assault, Ms. Carter. We'll be bringing both the flight attendant and pilot in for questioning. The video makes this an easy case." After the detective left, Jasmine's lawyer arrived with more papers to sign. "We've filed complaints with the FAA, the Department of Transportation, and the airline's ethics board," he explained. "Also, I should mention that our financial team has secured options to purchase up to 15% of TransGlobal's shares whenever you're ready to move." Jasmine nodded. "Let's wait until the news breaks. The stock will drop and we'll get more for our money." By late afternoon, Jasmine's investigative team had uncovered more disturbing information. A former HR employee at TransGlobal had come forward, revealing that complaints about discriminatory behavior were routinely buried, especially when they involved senior staff like Derek, who had family connections in the company. "The corporate culture starts at the top," the former employee explained in a recorded interview. CEO Wilson made it clear that public image matters more than addressing real problems. "I left because I couldn't be part of it anymore." Jasmine paced her office, thinking. This was bigger than just her incident now. This was about a system that allowed such behavior to flourish. Her phone rang. It was the businessman from the plane who had recorded the video. "Ms. Carter, I just wanted to check if you're taking action. I've been a TransGlobal frequent flyer for years, but I've never seen anything like what happened to you." "I am," Jasmine assured him, "and I'd like to thank you for recording it. Would you be willing to make a statement if needed?" "Absolutely," he replied. What they did was wrong, plain and simple. By evening, Jasmine's team had gathered statements from 7 other passengers who had witnessed the incident. Each described the unprovoked slap and the co-pilot's tacit approval. 2 more passengers had come forward with their own stories of discriminatory treatment on previous TransGlobal flights. Jasmine's phone buzzed with a text from her father. "How are you holding up, baby girl?" She smiled at his message. Her father had raised her alone after her mother died, teaching her to stand up for herself while always maintaining her dignity. "I'm good, Dad. This isn't just about me anymore," she texted back. That night, Jasmine's investigative team made another discovery. Derek Stevens had previously been employed by 2 other airlines, but had left both under unclear circumstances. Further digging revealed confidential settlements at both companies involving passenger complaints. "They knew," Jasmine said, reviewing the documents. "TransGlobal hired him knowing his history." Her PR director came in with a proposed strategy. "We've got enough to go public now. One press release and this explodes." But Jasmine shook her head. "Not yet. I want to understand exactly how deep this goes before we move. Keep digging." As she was about to leave for the night, her security chief called. "Ms. Carter, there's something you should know. Someone from TransGlobal has been trying to identify who you are. They're asking questions about the first-class passenger from yesterday's flight." "They're finally getting nervous," Jasmine said. "Good. Let them sweat a little longer." She stood at her office window, looking out at the city lights. 3 days had passed since the slap, and she had built a case stronger than even she had expected. This wasn't just about revenge anymore, it was about accountability. Her reflection in the window showed the determined face of a woman who had turned a humiliating moment into a mission for justice. Tomorrow, she would begin the next phase of her plan, and TransGlobal Airlines would never be the same again. The 4th day after the incident dawned with Jasmine reviewing the final reports from her investigative team. The stack of papers on her desk told a story of systematic problems at TransGlobal Airlines, a story that went far beyond one slap on one flight. "We're ready to move on the stock purchase," said Wilson, her financial advisor, looking slightly nervous. "But I have to ask, are you sure about this? It's a significant diversion from our usual investment strategy." Jasmine swiveled in her chair to face the wall of windows. Rain streaked down the glass, mirroring how the airline's reputation would soon be pouring down the drain. "I'm not just making a financial decision," she explained. "This is about changing a corporate culture that protects people like Miranda and Derek while ignoring the harm they cause." Her phone rang. It was her lawyer. "The police have formally charged both Miranda Brooks and Derek Stevens with assault," he reported. "They were taken in for questioning this morning. The airline has been notified." Jasmine nodded. "And how are they responding?" "They've issued a standard statement about taking all allegations seriously and conducting an internal investigation. The usual corporate speak." "Not good enough," Jasmine said simply. By noon, Her team had finalized the stock purchase strategy. They would begin buying shares as soon as the news of the assault charges hit the media, which would happen within the hour, thanks to a press release from the police department. Jasmine's PR director knocked on her door. The first news outlets have picked up the story. They're running with flight crew members charged with assaulting passenger. No mention of your identity yet. Perfect, Jasmine said, checking her watch. Let's wait 30 minutes for the story to spread, then start buying. Exactly half an hour later, Jasmine received the alert that TransGlobal's stock had begun to drop. Investors were reacting to the negative press. She gave the signal, and her financial team began purchasing shares. By mid-afternoon, TransGlobal's CEO had issued a video statement, looking uncomfortable as he addressed the camera. We at TransGlobal Airlines take these allegations very seriously. The staff members involved have been placed on administrative leave pending our investigation. We want to assure our customers that this incident does not reflect our company values. Jasmine watched the statement with a small smile. He doesn't even know what's coming next, she said to her assistant. A knock at her office door announced the arrival of her head of security. Ms. Carter, TransGlobal's board of directors, is having an emergency meeting at 4 p.m. Our source says they're panicking as the stock continues to drop. Time for phase 2, Jasmine decided. She picked up the phone and dialed a number she'd been saving. Mr. Henderson, this is Jasmine Carter. Yes, that Jasmine Carter. I believe you're heading into a board meeting about an incident on one of your flights. I'd like to join that meeting. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. You were the passenger? The shock in the board chairman's voice was evident. I was, and I now own nearly 12% of your company's shares, purchased over the last few hours. I think that entitles me to join the discussion about its future, don't you? Another long pause. I'll send a car. 2 hours later, Jasmine walked into TransGlobal's headquarters, turning heads as she crossed the lobby. Most employees had no idea who she was, but the executives rushing to greet her certainly did. Ms. Carter, I'm Thomas Henderson, chairman of the board. We had no idea the passenger involved was, well, you. Clearly, Jasmine replied coolly. Would it have mattered if I wasn't who I am? If I was just an ordinary person trying to get home? Henderson had the decency to look embarrassed. Of course it would matter. Any assault on a passenger is unacceptable. Yet your company has a history of ignoring exactly these kinds of incidents, Jasmine said. Shall we discuss that with the board? The boardroom fell silent when Jasmine entered. 8 men and 2 women sat around a mahogany table, their faces showing a mixture of concern and curiosity. CEO Richard Wilson stood. Ms. Carter, I want to personally apologize for what happened on our flight. I'm not here for apologies, Jasmine replied, setting her briefcase on the table. I'm here because I've spent the last 4 days investigating your company, and I don't like what I found. She opened her briefcase and pulled out a thick folder. 17 cases of discriminatory treatment in the last 3 years. 5 lawsuits settled quietly. 10 complaints against the same flight attendant who slapped me, all of them buried by your HR department. The board members exchanged nervous glances. You have a systemic problem, Jasmine continued. And as a significant shareholder as of today, I have some ideas about how to fix it. The next morning, news vans lined the street outside TransGlobal Airlines headquarters. Reporters stood with microphones ready, their camera crews adjusting equipment as they waited for the announced press conference to begin. Inside, Jasmine reviewed her notes one last time while the company's PR team buzzed around nervously. They had tried to suggest changes to her planned statement, but she had politely declined. Are you sure you want to do this? Asked Henderson, the board chairman. We could handle this more discreetly. Discretion is what allowed this problem to grow, Jasmine replied. Sometimes the only way to heal is to bring things into the light. At exactly 10 a.m., Jasmine walked through the glass doors of TransGlobal's headquarters and approached the podium set up for the press conference. Camera flashes erupted as reporters recognized her. Good morning, she began, her voice steady. My name is Jasmine Carter. 5 days ago, I boarded a TransGlobal Airlines flight as a first-class passenger. When I asked for assistance with my luggage, I was slapped across the face by a flight attendant while a co-pilot watched and approved. Gasps rippled through the crowd of reporters. Someone called out, "Ms. Carter, are you saying you were the unnamed passenger in the assault case?" Jasmine nodded. I was. And at first, I was simply going to file charges and move on. But something told me to dig deeper. She held up a tablet showing the video of the incident. This is what happened to me. But I wasn't the first, and I suspect I wouldn't have been the last if changes weren't made. For the next 10 minutes, Jasmine outlined what her investigation had uncovered. The pattern of complaints, the corporate culture that buried problems instead of solving them, the lack of accountability at every level. Yesterday, I purchased enough shares in Transglobal Airlines to become its largest individual shareholder, she revealed, causing another stir among the reporters. I did this not to destroy the company, but to transform it. A reporter raised her hand. Ms. Carter, are you saying you bought the airline that mistreated you? Not exactly, Jasmine smiled. I bought enough of it to ensure that what happened to me never happens to anyone else on a transglobal flight. She then announced the changes that would be implemented immediately. The creation of an independent passenger advocacy office, mandatory anti-bias training for all staff, a complete overhaul of the complaint system, and a review of all previously filed complaints. Additionally, she continued, CEO Richard Wilson has submitted his resignation, which the board has accepted. The crowd erupted with questions, but Jasmine raised her hand for silence. Let me be clear about something. This isn't about revenge. This is about responsibility. When companies ignore discrimination and mistreatment, they become part of the problem. I have the resources to fight back, but many people don't. Her voice grew stronger. Every day, people face discrimination and have no recourse. They're slapped, figuratively and sometimes literally, and told to accept it. Today, I'm using my position to say that's not acceptable, not at Transglobal or anywhere else. As she finished her statement, her phone buzzed with a message from her father. So proud of you, baby girl. You didn't just stand up for yourself, you're standing up for everyone. The questions from reporters came rapid fire. What will happen to the staff members who assaulted you? Will you take an active role in running the airline? Did you plan this response immediately after the incident? Jasmine answered each question calmly and directly. Yes, the staff members would face the consequences of their actions through proper legal channels. Yes, she would temporarily join the board to oversee the implementation of changes. And yes, she had decided within minutes of the slap that something significant needed to change. After the press conference, Jasmine returned to the boardroom where Transglobal's executives waited anxiously. The stock is down 15% since the news broke, one director reported grimly. It will recover, Jasmine assured them. Companies that treat people with respect and dignity ultimately perform better. This is as much a business decision as a moral one. Later that afternoon, Jasmine received an unexpected visitor at her office. It was Mrs. Chen, an elderly woman who had been sitting 2 rows behind her on the flight. I saw you on the news, Mrs. Chen said. I was on that flight. I saw what happened, but I was too afraid to speak up. I've been flying Transglobal for 30 years, and I've seen how they treat people who look like us. I just wanted to say thank you for doing what many of us couldn't. Jasmine took the woman's hands in hers. This is exactly why it matters. Change doesn't happen if we stay silent. As Mrs. Chen left, Jasmine turned back to her window, watching the city below. The slap had lasted a second. The pain had faded in minutes, but the changes she had set in motion would last for years to come. The morning after the press conference, Jasmine arrived at Transglobal's headquarters to find the lobby transformed. Security guards who had previously seemed indifferent now stood alert and respectful. Employees watched her with a mixture of awe and nervousness as she walked to the elevator. The board is waiting for you in the main conference room, said Linda, the former CEO's assistant who now worked with Jasmine. And there's something else you should know. Miranda and Derek are in the building. Jasmine paused. Why are they here? They were called in for their formal termination meetings. HR thought it best to do it in person, given the circumstances. Jasmine nodded and continued to the elevator. She hadn't expected to face her attackers today, but perhaps it was better to get it over with. The board meeting was tense but productive. The members who had initially resisted Jasmine's involvement were now eager to show their support for her proposed changes. They reviewed the new complaint reporting system and the hiring process for a chief ethics officer. The public response has been overwhelming, reported the head of communications, sliding a folder across the table. We've received thousands of emails and social media messages. Many people are sharing their own stories of discrimination on flights, not just ours, but across the industry. Jasmine opened the folder. The first page showed a social media post that had gone viral. What happened to Jasmine Carter happens to ordinary people every day. The difference is, we can't buy the company and fix it. #RespectInTheskes. The hashtag had been shared over 200,000 times. This is bigger than Transglobal now, Jasmine observed. This is about changing industry standards. As the meeting concluded, Jasmine's phone buzzed with a text from Linda. Miranda and Derek are waiting in the HR conference room. Their termination is complete. They've asked to speak with you before they leave. Jasmine considered this for a moment. Tell them I'll be there in 5 minutes. When she entered the conference room, Miranda and Derek sat on one side of the table. Miranda's eyes were red from crying, while Derek maintained the same defiant posture he'd had on the flight. You've cost us our careers, Derek said immediately, before the HR director could speak. Jasmine sat down calmly across from them. No, Mr. Stevens. You cost yourselves your careers when you decided that some passengers deserve respect and others don't. Miranda looked up, her voice shaking. I've worked for airlines for 15 years. What am I supposed to do now? That's not my concern, Jasmine replied evenly. But I would suggest using this as an opportunity for reflection. The police charges will proceed regardless of what happens here today. Derek leaned forward. Do you know how hard it is to work with the public? Passengers are demanding rude. I didn't ask for special treatment, Jasmine interrupted. I asked for the same respect you'd give any passenger. When you chose to slap me, you crossed a line that can't be uncrossed. The HR director cleared her throat. Ms. Carter didn't have to meet with you today. She agreed as a courtesy. Miranda wiped her eyes. I don't understand why this became such a big deal. It was just a slap. Jasmine's expression remained calm, but her eyes flashed. It was never just a slap. It was a public humiliation meant to put me in my place. It was the culmination of a culture that allowed you to believe that such behavior was acceptable. She stood up. I wish you both well, but there are consequences for our actions. That's a lesson we all learn eventually. As Jasmine left the conference room, she found the hallway filled with Transglobal employees. They parted to let her through, many nodding respectfully as she passed. Later that afternoon, Jasmine received a visit from the new interim CEO, Diane Powell, a former airline executive known for her commitment to customer service. The training programs you suggested are being implemented next week, Diane reported, and I've been reviewing the personnel files. There are at least 3 other employees with multiple complaints who need to be addressed. Good, Jasmine nodded. What about the passengers who previously filed complaints? Have we reached out to them? We're contacting each one personally. Many are shocked to be hearing from us at all. One woman cried on the phone. She said no one had ever taken her seriously before. As evening approached, Jasmine stood on the executive floor, looking out at the Transglobal planes lined up at the nearby airport. Their familiar blue and white paint gleamed in the setting sun. Her phone rang. It was the district attorney handling the assault case. Ms. Carter, I wanted to let you know that both defendants have agreed to plea deals. They'll each serve community service and attend mandatory anger management and anti-bias training. That seems appropriate, Jasmine replied. Thank you for calling. After hanging up, Jasmine took one last look at the Transglobal logo on the wall. The slap that had started this journey had led to consequences, yes, but also to a chance for real change. As she headed home, a message appeared on her phone from a number she didn't recognize. I was afraid to stand up when it happened on your flight. I won't be silent next time. Thank you for showing me how to be brave. 6 days had passed since the slap. In that time, a moment of humiliation had transformed into a movement for respect and dignity. Jasmine smiled as she stepped into her car, knowing that the most important work was still ahead. 1 year after the infamous slap that changed Transglobal Airlines forever, Jasmine Carter stood at a podium in the company's newly renovated headquarters. Behind her hung a banner that read "Respect in Flight, 1 year of transformation." The room was packed with employees, media, and industry representatives. When I boarded that flight last year, I never imagined I would be standing here today, Jasmine began, her voice clear and confident. What started as a terrible experience has evolved into something none of us could have predicted. In the front row sat her father, beaming with pride. Next to him were several passengers from that fateful flight, including the businessman who had recorded the incident and Mrs. Chen, the elderly woman who had later thanked Jasmine for speaking up. Today, I'm proud to announce that Transglobal Airlines has the lowest complaint rate in the industry, Jasmine continued. Our customer satisfaction scores have increased by 47% and employee retention has improved by 35%. The audience applauded enthusiastically. What many had expected to be a temporary public relations effort had instead become a genuine transformation. After the slap incident and Jasmine's takeover, Transglobal had implemented sweeping changes. Every employee had completed comprehensive anti-bias training. The new chief ethics officer had established a transparent complaint system that addressed issues within 48 hours. The company had hired the most diverse executive team in the airline industry's history. Our success proves what I believed from the beginning, Jasmine said. Treating people with dignity isn't just the right thing to do, it's good business. The numbers backed her up. After an initial drop, Transglobal's stock had rebounded dramatically. The airline had become the carrier of choice for business travelers and families alike, with its new slogan, "Where everyone flies first class in respect," resonating with customers tired of being treated poorly. But our work isn't finished, Jasmine continued. Today, I'm announcing the launch of the Respect in Flight Foundation, funded with $20 million from Transglobal and my personal contribution. This foundation will work to combat discrimination across the service industry and provide legal support to those who experience mistreatment but lack the resources to fight back. After the ceremony, Jasmine mingled with the guests. A young flight attendant approached her nervously. "Ms. Carter, I joined Transglobal 6 months ago. I just wanted to say that the training we receive now is like nothing I've seen at other airlines. You've changed how we see our jobs." Jasmine smiled. "That means more to me than any financial success." Later, in a quiet moment, the journalist who had broken the original story about the slap pulled Jasmine aside. "Have you ever heard what happened to Miranda and Derek?" she asked. Jasmine shook her head. "I haven't kept track of them. My focus has been on moving forward." Miranda completed her community service and then enrolled in college. She's studying social work now. Derek has had a harder time. He tried to get hired at other airlines but couldn't. Last I heard, he was working as a driving instructor. Jasmine absorbed this information thoughtfully. "I hope they both found something valuable in this experience, just as I did." As the event wound down, Jasmine's father joined her by the window overlooking the airport runway, where Transglobal planes now sported a new logo and color scheme, a symbolic fresh start. "You know what I'm most proud of?" he said, putting his arm around her shoulders. "Not that you fought back, not that you won, but that you turned a moment of pain into something that helps others." Jasmine nodded. "That slap was meant to put me in my place. Instead, it helped me find my purpose." They watched as a Transglobal plane took off, climbing into the clear blue sky. That evening, Jasmine received an unexpected email from a flight attendant at another airline. "I witnessed a supervisor yelling at a passenger yesterday for no good reason. Before what happened with you, I would have stayed quiet. But today I reported it. They're investigating. Thank you for showing all of us that speaking up matters." Jasmine smiled as she closed her laptop. The slap had lasted just a second. The pain had faded quickly. But the ripples of change continued to spread across an industry that had long needed transformation. As she prepared for bed, Jasmine's phone buzzed with one last message from the businessman who had recorded the incident a year ago. "Just boarded a Transglobal flight. The difference in how the crew treats everyone is night and day. One moment of courage changed an entire company. Never underestimate the power of standing up for what's right." Jasmine set down her phone and looked out at the city lights. Sometimes life's hardest moments led to the most important journeys. What had begun with a slap had become a movement, and the movement was just getting started.